Thanks, Robert. Thanks to the CPS for putting on such an incredibly intellectually rich conference. And I've been able to be here for part of it and followed bits of the rest on video and Twitter. And it really has given us so much food for thought. And thank you for giving me the distinct honour of being able to wrap it up. You're absolutely right as an organisation to bring the focus back to trade policy. It's got huge potential to make our country more prosperous still. I'll say more about that in a moment, but first of all, for me personally, obviously it's a change to be invited to talk about something other than the Northern Ireland Protocol. Though equally, I've got to say that issue is, as you would expect, my top priority. Indeed, when we discuss trade in this country, we must not forget that our most urgent and pressing problem, an issue of the highest national interest, is to make sure we can trade freely within our own country. I don't think that's too much to ask, and that's where we need to get to, one way or the other. Coming back to trade, leaving the European Union changes many things for this country, but perhaps none more immediately and visibly than the UK's ability to fully control its international trade policy. For the first time in almost 5 decades, we're once again fully in control of our external tariffs, how goods and services come into the UK, which countries we do bilateral deals with, and how we wish to engage in multilateral bodies around the world. No more sitting silently behind the EU nameplate, instead a chance to really influence discussions in our own interests. So my friend Anne-Marie Trevelyan has already said a lot today about the progress we're making on these issues in our own tariff regime, at the WTO, and of course in our own FTA programme, and I won't repeat that now. But what I do want to underline is that none of that progress would have been possible if we'd done what many wanted and gone with a different form of Brexit, one that kept us more closely in the EU's orbit. Our policy on all these matters would have remained subcontracted to a remote organisation, many stages removed from our citizens, with even less democratic oversight than when we were a member state. As far as I can tell, many people, indeed Vince Cable, as we just heard, would like to inch us back to that situation over time, and that can't be right. It can't be right because trade policy affects many things of direct concern to everybody in this country. The breadth of choice and the cost of goods available to the public, the ability of entrepreneurs to grow their businesses by expanding into new markets, the debate about producer versus consumer interests at home, the balance of openness and protectionism that we've just heard debated. And it is surely right that such hugely significant questions of national economic policy are subject to proper public debate and democratically accountable decisions. And already this is beginning to happen. For the first time for many years, we've got a proper debate about trade policy. Whether it is which countries we seek deeper trade relations with, whether it's tariffs on steel, whether it's the balance between cheaper food for Brits and protecting our own farmers. For 50 years, we couldn't make these decisions for ourselves, and now we can. And to make the best decisions, we need the fullest and the freest possible debate. I believe free debate is a good thing. That's why I'm here. It forces everyone to test their arguments, and I strongly believe it means the best ideas win. And that's why I'm a bit of a free speech zealot myself on every subject, not just free trade. We need to make sure the room for testing ideas and for free debate is properly protected, whether it's trade policy, economic policy, or indeed the right policy to manage the consequences of coronavirus. I worry about some of the constraints in practice about what can now be said in the public arena, and free speech is the best guarantor of democracy, and we restrict it at our peril. Keeping this room for debate is central to how we manage the kind of country we want to be after Brexit. It goes to the heart of the new policy freedoms we have outside the EU and the question of democracy, the most fundamental cornerstone of Brexit. We're now in a different position to the EU member states. Trade policy is only one of the things that EU members can't change in their elections. Most can't also change their fiscal policy, their industrial policy, competition policy, energy policy, and so on. If you're in the euro, obviously you can't change monetary policy either. Those countries have made that choice, it's for them. But personally, I can't help believing that the high levels of churn in political parties and leaders in EU countries, the fraying of party structures, the rise of genuinely populist and anti-system parties is not some way connected to this inability to change a lot of important things through elections. And that's why I'm glad we've taken a different road here in the UK. Our elections now matter. Everything can change as a result of them, and politicians have got to compete in the marketplace of ideas. We have to persuade people that free markets and free institutions are the best way forward, and if we can't do that, we will lose. That's why engaging in the battle of ideas with organisations like the CPS at the forefront is so crucial. It's all the more important, of course, because as a country, we're on our own now. Our destiny is in our own hands. We have to step up and compete at a global level. It's no longer good enough to be the most attractive economy in the EU. We face global competition. We have to benchmark ourselves against the whole of the world. That is a big challenge for government as well as the private sector. And that's why I have the job I have. It's not just about EU negotiations. It's about trying to ensure there is consistency between what's required by our agreement with the EU, by our FTAs with other countries, and by the programme of domestic reforms that our new freedoms make possible. My job is to try and drive change within government, to push policy in the right direction, to overcome the forces of entropy, of laziness, of vested interest. And what Brexit means for the future, it depends on whether we can seize these opportunities, whether we can liberalise, free up, create competition on our own market, create the conditions for innovation and productivity growth. So I don't share the views of those who think we can treat the private sector as just a convenient way of keeping the public sector running. It isn't just a source of taxes, nor is it a bunch of people who will inevitably do bad things unless the government keeps a close eye on them. We can't carry on as we were before. If after Brexit all we do is import the European social model, we will not succeed. We haven't successfully rolled back the frontiers of the European Union from Britain with Brexit, only to import the European model after all this time. So we need to reform fast, and those reforms are going to involve doing things differently from the EU. If we stick to EU models, but behind our own tariff wall and with a smaller market, obviously we're not going to succeed. That's why I so often talk about divergence, not for the sake of it, but because it's a national necessity. What we're now doing is beginning this project as a government, though I'll be the first to admit there's a lot more to do. We're liberalising the growth areas of the future to open them up to innovation, data reform, gene editing, transport, medical licensing devices, artificial intelligence, and more. To some extent unnoticed, we're making changes to the nuts and bolts of some of the core frameworks underpinning the economy to make them less bureaucratic, more dynamic than the EU regimes we left behind. State aid, procurement being primary examples. We're phasing in a new domestic agriculture support regime. Our immigration system has been reformed, and we're conducting a systematic review of all the retained EU law which we've inherited, laws which never received proper democratic scrutiny before being implemented in the UK, and looking at ways to reform and change that so we can put ourselves on the best possible basis to meet the competition. This is only the beginning. We've got to keep challenging ourselves. It's all too easy to get captured by the interest groups and the lobbies. We don't have time for that. The world isn't standing still, and nobody owes us a living, and earning one is now fully in our own hands. We know what the formula for success as a country is. It's low taxes. I agree with the Chancellor, as he said in his budget speech, our goal must be to reduce taxes. It's about light touch, proportionate regulation, whatever the policy objectives you're trying to pursue. And of course, free trade. Increasing consumer choice while reducing consumer costs. ensuring that competition stops complacency, keeping our economy fit and responsive to innovation and progress abroad. And personal freedom and responsibility. Unavoidably, we've had a lot of state direction and control during the pandemic. That cannot and must not last forever, and I'm glad that it is not. I'm very happy that free Britain, or at least, I guess, merry England, is probably now the freest country in the world as regards COVID restrictions. No mask rules, no vaccine passports, and long may it remain so. Ladies and gentlemen, Baroness Thatcher famously said in 1984 that she'd come to office, and I quote, with the deliberate intention to change Britain from a dependent to a self-reliant society, to a do-it-yourself nation, a get-up-and-go Britain. She succeeded. And if at times recently we might have seemed to have lost some of that spirit, I think Brexit is bringing it back. The amazing response of the private sector during the pandemic shows it's still there. A determination to face problems and overcome them, to innovate and find new solutions, and to ensure that we continue creating wealth, driving growth, ensuring the best for everybody in this country. That's the spirit that will ensure this country succeeds, and I'll work to ensure that it does. Thank you very much.